controller preferred steam engines on his railway, but he found diesels useful too, because they could pull either coaches or trucks. "You're versatile," he would say to them. "Real mixed traffic engines." Boko, Daisy, Salty and Mavis were proud of this. But despite not having a problem with diesel since his injectors failed, James still wasn't impressed. He liked these 4 diesels, but he treated all others like Harry, Bert and Diesel with deep suspicion. "Diesels don't use coal and water," he would often say darkly. "How can you trust an engine who isn't normal in its habits?" "They're not all that bad," Henry would say. "They're just mixed traffic engines like you and me." "Mixed up engines, you mean?" James would say. "With 2 cabs and windows at each end, how can they know if they're coming or going?" "Well, Toby has 2 cabs," remarked Thomas, "and he gets on all right." "Toby's just a little engine," scoffed James. "If an important engine like me didn't know which way to work, what would the railway come to?" Visiting diesels sometimes boasted about how special they were. Usually Boko and the others had to spend the day smoothing ruffled feelings. One day, Thomas saw a new diesel, whose name was Dennis, shunting some trucks in the yard. Thomas could see that the trucks were being troublesome as usual. When Dennis eventually gave it up, he stopped beside Thomas and refused to shunt any more. "Why does your controller keep such troublesome trucks?" he growled. "Horrid awkward things! Blech!" The trucks found that remark insulting. "That's probably because you're not used to them," replied Thomas kindly. "I remember when the trucks first played tricks on me because I wasn't used to them." "Well, on our railway," Dennis continued, "trucks are kept strictly in their place and would never dare play such tricks on revolutionary engines like us." Thomas's driver became very suspicious of Dennis. "I'd watch him if I were you," he whispered. "It sounds to me like he is a rather lazy diesel." Thomas took note of that. "Tell you what," he said to Dennis, "I've got a branch line train to take first, but if you're still here when I come back, I'll help you out." "Oh, thank you," smiled Dennis kindly. He was very pleased. But Thomas's driver still had his suspicions as Thomas puffed away. "I hope Thomas comes back soon," snorted the trucks to each other. "At least someone might want to preserve us. Who did him? That lazy good-for-nothing diesel." By the time Thomas came back later that afternoon, Dennis still hadn't moved. "I knew it," said Thomas's driver. "He's lazy." "Don't be so sure," replied Thomas, as he stopped beside Dennis. "Oh, I'm glad you've come back," Dennis said. "I've tried my hardest, but these awkward things still won't move." This made the trucks very cross. To make matters worse, Thomas then proceeded to bump them around the yard until they were put in their place. Soon the trucks were in good order. "They should be all right now," said Thomas at last. "But just in case they start playing up again, I'll go with you to the first signal on your journey." "By the way," he asked, "where are you going?" "To the schoolhouse," Dennis replied, "but I'm not sure where that is." "Like I said, I'll go with you to the first signal," replied Thomas kindly. "Then from there, it's only a short journey to the schoolhouse station." "Oh, thank you," Dennis replied happily. As Thomas didn't have many jobs to do that afternoon, he kept his word and went with Dennis to the first signal of his journey. "Here we are," said Thomas. "The schoolhouse is just a short journey from here to the station platform." Thomas then puffed away, and Dennis was left alone. "Ah, that's better," he purred to himself. "How can an engine hear the birds singing with all that hissing and clanking?" On his way to his next job, Thomas met Percy beside a water tower. "The workmen are waiting for the tiles to repair the schoolhouse roof," Percy cried urgently. "But the new diesel delivering them hasn't arrived, and the head teacher has complained to the fat controller." "That's funny," thought Thomas. I just saw the diesel delivering the tiles, and I... Suddenly, Thomas remembered what his driver had said. "You were right, driver," he said. "There was something suspicious about Dennis after all. We must go and find him at once." "I knew you'd see sense," replied his driver. "Come on, let's go." Dennis was so full of selfishness that he didn't care about Thomas, the delivery, or the schoolhouse. "There's nobody about," he whispered to his driver. "Why don't we sneak away back to the shed? Let those silly steam engines take these trucks, and take the blame for the late delivery as well." Reluctantly, his driver agreed, and Dennis scuttled quickly away. Too quickly. He couldn't have known that some points were set to a siding that had no buffers, which he had passed earlier. When he finally realised, he was going much too fast to stop in time. "Brake blocks and buffers! I can't stop!" he wailed. His driver braked hard, but Dennis crashed deep into the earth beyond the siding. Dennis wasn't badly hurt, but black smoke billowed from his engine, and oil leaked out of his damaged tanks. When Thomas found Dennis in his predicament, he was very cross. "My driver was right about you," he snapped. "I don't know why the Fat Controller brought you here in the first place. You're nothing but a lazy, good-for-nothing diesel, and to make matters worse, the workmen are still waiting for your delivery of tiles." Dennis knew that Thomas was right. "I'm sorry," he sighed sadly. That evening, at the sheds, Thomas told the other engines the whole story. "Ho, chortled Henry. "Old Dennis became a stick in the mud, did he? I say, Boko, what is it the Fat Controller calls you?" "He says we're versatile," chuckled Boko. "That wasn't what he said to Dennis, was it, Thomas?" "No, indeed," replied Thomas. "I couldn't quite hear what he said about him when we finally arrived at the schoolhouse station, but I don't think it sounded very polite."